Hello, everybody, and welcome to this episode of the Leafs Line Podcast. I am your host, Mayor Russo. Joining me today is Evan Davis and Jared Rotenberg. We are the Adamo Romoliless team this evening, and we got a lot to talk about. Well, I mean, I don't know about a lot, but I think going into deep with these two teams, the Winnipeg Jets and the Florida Panthers, these are two teams on the opposite sides of the spectrum when in the preseason, in the offseason, we kind of had them switching places a little bit. We'll get into more in just a little bit. And we're midway through the season. A lot of teams are starting to take form and kind of maybe, I'm not going to say running away with it unless you're the Boston Bruins, because I just checked the standings before we jumped on, and man, I would be remiss if I did not mention them once again. I think I've mentioned them every podcast, but never going really into them. They are, I've never seen a team as dominant. They got what, eight losses, 9 losses on the entire year, including the overtime losses.
So including overtime, yeah, they're 4-4, like 4 losses,
yeah.
4 overtime.
And the second place team is the Toronto Maple Leafs, and I think they got how many losses? 9. So it kind of adds up, and 9 of regulation losses. It just makes it that much more outstanding. So the Boston Bruins, they are continuing to run the table, run the show. We're going to talk about a team today that's trying to run the show a little bit. It's changing every now and then. In the Central, we'll start it off the Winnipeg Jets. Currently, they sit second in the Central Division. 25-14-1 is their record. They got ran out of the building in Detroit last night. And if we were talking about these guys the night before, I think we'd have a lot much better say, but I don't think it's going to change it too much because this team has just been so dominant all season long. And Jared, I think you'd be the first to tell us here. I wouldn't say we. I'd say me, Evan, and Adamo, if he was here, we did not expect this whatsoever. You had them. You knew this was all going to happen. It was all going to fall into place. They're going to win the GOAT. His prediction, if you guys are new to the show, first of all, welcome. But if you're new to the show, in the preseason, Jared mentioned that they were going to go to the Stanley Cup Finals. That got a really big death stare. And Jared, you were so bodacious to say that they were going to win the Stanley Cup, correct?
No, I didn't. I had Tampa beating them in the finals. Regardless, I said they were going to the Stanley Cup Finals, and you guys thought I was crazy for even having them in the playoffs.
So.
It's not April yet. Like
I'm not saying. I'm saying right now,
no,
you guys called me crazy for having them in the playoffs, and right now they look really good.
They do look really good. I'm going to tell you who's been really good for them. There's a couple of players, and one that, man, if you would have predicted this, Jared, I think I would have just given you all my money in my bank account and just say run away with it and bets. Because if you were to say Josh Morrissey would be leading almost the front runner for the Norris Trophy, Josh Morrissey is the name he's going by now. I'd call you crazy. Dude, he has, I'm looking at it right now, 46 points in 41 games. And I don't care. You want to say he's only got 7 goals. So what? This guy's producing and making a play on every single goal that they score. He's helping them win, and in big ways too. I never thought of this. I didn't even think he was the offensive defenseman on that pairing. Neil Pionk was always there, and he was driving the force for the last couple of years. He comes out of nowhere. Evan, I'm going to throw it over to you. Josh Morrissey, man, he is having a season of his life, the season of his career. If this is his contract year, I don't know if it is, but if it was, man, would he be getting a nice fat $10 million, $11 million contract in. But what are your thoughts on his play? How is he driving the team? And is this Winnipeg Jets squad kind of driven from the blue line out, or maybe even the goaltending out, because Hellebuck's been so successful as well?
Yeah, I'm just placing my futures bet on Josh Morrissey to win the Norris at plus 650 here. Just give me a second. Nice little return there. But oh my God, like I can't believe, like, I wouldn't think that Josh Morrissey, like, of all players, like, and he's always been like a semi-consistent offensive defenseman, but like he was always more known for his defense. I don't know what he did in the offseason that all of a sudden like turned him into better than Cale Makar right now. And I just want to look up if this is his contract year, but I don't know enough about him to even like think it was, because like last year he had 39 points, which was like solid, but I mean obviously he smoked that already, and we're not even at the All-Star break. I'm looking at, he just signed an extension, so he's getting paid. He got 8 years, $50 million starting in the 2021 season. So he's locked up for a very long time at a solid AAV. Not just, I don't know what he's going to be like next year, because I've never seen anything like this, but he's been great. Neil Pionk has been great for them. I feel like the NHL world doesn't talk about Kyle Connor enough. Like, this guy just put up 93 points last year, I believe it was, and like nobody has even talked about him. And it's weird because like he always, for as many goals as he puts up like the same amount of assists. So like it's kind of weird. I think he had 47 goals, 46 assists last year. And then Pierre-Luc Dubois, who everyone thought was going to be out of Winnipeg because it seemed very clear that he wanted to leave. And maybe it's a Jake DeBrusk situation where a new coach has lit a fire under him, as it has with Jake DeBrusk. in Boston. So look, they're hot right now. They have a lot of depth, and they were winning without Nikolai Ehlers, Cole
Yeah.
Perfetti. So
Wait till that guy comes back, man. Ehlers has been
yeah,
out of the lineup for a while. He's been struggling with injuries,
yeah,
and he's you know how his talent goes.
yeah. I think Ehlers came back last game versus Detroit, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, like he's currently penciled into their top
Yeah,
line, so I believe he is back from injury. But regardless, like they haven't played with their entire team healthy for quite a while now, and they're still remaining consistent in being one of the top teams in the league.
Yeah,
absolutely. And
yeah.
you want to add anything else, Evan, before we kind of
No,
into
no,
the
they're
more?
just I
Just,
just didn't. We thought
just
their defense
yeah.
was horrible last year, and they were constantly leaving Hellebuck out to dry. I mean, even if you look at last night's game against Detroit, like a lot of those goals were just unfortunate bounces that just ended up in the back of the net. But regardless, I just maybe it's Rick Bowness. He seems to get the best out of his players. When he was with Dallas and they went
Mm-hmm.
to the Stanley Cup final, nobody was expect. Yeah, they did go to. Yeah, when they
Yeah,
went
yeah,
to the
it's fine, it's
Stanley
fine.
Cup final in that bubble, in the
Yeah.
Yeah.
bubble year, like nobody expected that, and they ended up surprising a lot of people. And now he's doing the same with Winnipeg.
And Rick Bowness is a guy that I want to kind of take a bit of more focus on because I think he's the leading guy to kind of contribute this success to. The players have done all they can, but the guy who's really talking to the players, and you saw that switch drastically from compared from last season to this season. This team just looks so much more threatening. Now we know Rick Bowness when he was with Dallas, a very big defensive team. That was their edge in the playoffs, and that was what we kind of noticed as they made their way through that bubble tournament. Well, this team right here, fifth in goals allowed. They're in the top metrics for all the other defensive categories. They are a very high defensive team. They got defensive scoring. They got a great goaltender that had a tough year last year and bounced back really well. We know we're seeing the Vezina Hellebuck that we all thought we would. And I have to credit a lot to Rick Bowness. In my opinion, he is the big front runner. And I mean, you could throw him up for Jack Adams if you wanted to. You could throw him up for the Coaching of the Year award. You could throw him up to a lot of different like prestigious successes and awards. I think you could throw him up maybe to a Stanley Cup champion if they're going to keep this up. I think he's a really big outlier for why this team is so successful and having such great progress in the Central Division. Jared, you want to add anything on the Winnipeg Jets? I know you had a lot of faith in them heading in, and I mean what they've done so far this year. You're looking at guys, household names like Kyle Connor, who's not even that big of a household name, and is putting up this much. Pierre-Luc Dubois' resurgence into the league and into Winnipeg. He wanted to leave, but the fans now want him to stay because of how productive he's been. What are your thoughts on some of these guys, and just where's the finishing line for this Winnipeg Jets team, and what's going to have to get them there if this team actually has what you mentioned in with preseason, those Stanley Cup aspirations?
Well, what I'll say first of all is I do believe Rick Bowness deserves a lot of credit for how good this team is playing because we all, even though you guys weren't very high on them in the regular season, in the preseason, we all agreed that they are a talented team.
Mm-hmm.
The issues that people believed was going to lead to their downfall is that they had a lot of locker room issues and it was a lot of internal struggles that led to their bad performances on the ice where they weren't playing together as a team. What Rick Bowness has done, he's gotten into that locker room and basically told them to knock that garbage off. And he's gotten everyone to play to the best of their ability. And as a result, a team that on paper I always believed was very skilled is finally living up to that name and playing like the skilled team that I personally believed they were going to be. And even what you guys believed they were going to be in the sense that you guys did give them credit that they're skilled.
Absolutely.
It was just we all thought those locker room issues would lead to their downfall. And right now it isn't. They're playing way above all those issues. And even the guys that were at the headlines of those locker room issues, Mark Scheifele and Blake Wheeler, are carrying their weight right now and playing
Yeah.
like great players. And even Blake Wheeler, he got stripped of the captaincy, but he's playing like a leader. Not that I've watched a ton of Winnipeg Jets games this year, but in the ones I've seen, I've liked what I've seen from him. I've liked his play, but I've also liked that you see him kind of talking to the players on the bench. He's a good player and is finally living up to that name as the captain and playing like a leader of a very good team. And in general, they're just a team that deserves a ton of credit for the way they're playing right now. They definitely are strong in terms of their top six scoring. They're getting a ton of top six scoring. But as you mentioned as well, it's their defense and their goaltending that's absolutely stealing the show. Obviously, Josh Morrissey is the big name that everyone's talking about, but I'd say everyone on their defensive core is kind of stepping up and playing right now. Dylan DeMello is the defensive-minded guy playing on the same D pairing of Josh Morrissey, and he's as well shutting down the fort and helping out Connor Hellebuck tremendously. And as well, that second pairing of Brendan Dillon and Neil Pionk is doing very well. And the last line of defense, Connor Hellebuck, is right now playing like a Vezina candidate. So in general, they always had the skill, and Rick Bowness is allowing them to play up to that level. And Yeah, obviously we don't know how the second half of the year is going to go, but with the way they're playing right now, I'd say that they're looking like a team that not only is just going to have a great regular season, they're playing like a team that plays the same mold of game as teams that in the past have gone far in the playoffs. And we'll see if they end up going to the Stanley Cup Finals. But with the fact that they have better goaltending than I'd argue every other team in the West, I would say they have the best goaltending in the entire Western Conference. And with that, I find it hard to imagine a lot of teams in the Western Conference taking them down in a playoff series. I mean, looking back to my preseason predictions, the road that I had the Winnipeg Jets going on to get to the Stanley Cup Finals is I had them taking out the Edmonton Oilers in the first round. So that's a battle of Connor Hellebuck versus either Stuart Skinner or Jack Campbell. I know which way I'm leaning there. Then I had them in the second round taking up Jacob Markstrom. I believe Connor Hellebuck is better than Markstrom. And then last but not least, I had them taking out the Colorado Avalanche, who are playing with Pavel Francouz and Georgiev. And I'd argue Connor Hellebuck should beat out those guys, no question. So I think they are a great team, but I don't even think it's that they're carried by their goaltending. I just think they're a phenomenal team that has the privilege of having Connor Hellebuck in the net. And I think they're playing hockey right now that makes me believe in this team going far in the playoffs.
And if you want to, I'll add one thing and then I'll throw it over to you, Evan. If you want to go even further back when we were getting to this midway marker in the initial parts of the season, they smelled blood in the water. Colorado was not the same. It was very clear from opening night and going forward that they were not going to be the exact same team that repeated the success that they had in the Stanley Cup final and evidently winning the Stanley Cup. These teams did not look very similar. And these guys said, you know what, we're going to take advantage of it. We're going to go in there and be a force in the Central Division. Now, Dallas, another team that I think you can argue came out of absolutely nowhere. And I think that's kind of where you want to go as well, Evan. Dallas Stars, they were somewhat afterthoughts, just like we had with the Winnipeg Jets to an extent. And these two teams found a kind of keyhole within the Central Division, and they are just living up to all that expectation. Even the Minnesota Wild, I would even throw in there as well. They fought it back a little bit this year. They're going up and down, but they're keeping their head above water, and that's all you gotta do when the Colorado Avalanche are struggling. And when they're getting back together, you gotta take a punch to them. So that's a one thing as well. They're reading the situation in the Central well. The Central's always been decent for their competition. There's always a couple good teams that are fighting for that last spot. It always goes down to the wild card, so it seems. So this team, the Winnipeg Jets, are set for that. They have their eyes on the prize, and they kind of prepared for it, knowing that the Colorado Avalanche aren't going to be as great, and they had the talent to do so. And it just helped when you're getting back end from Morrissey and Hellebuck, two guys who could very well win some awards and some hardware this offseason. Evan, what do you want to add to this team before we move on to another group from the other conference?
Yeah, just to answer your question, like what does this team need in order to make a deep run? They're extremely weak in their bottom six and down the middle. I think if they are going to add one piece, it's got to be a center. Like just you got I think it's you got Mark Scheifele. Let me look. You got Mark Scheifele and Pierre-Luc Dubois, but Adam Lowry and David Gustafson, I'm not really salivating about. Especially when you look at the third line, even for Dallas, that would be the one team I would say as of right now, because I know Colorado, what they're going to be like in the playoffs if they are fully healthy. Like they've been just killed with injuries every year. It feels like every year it's either Landeskog, McKinnon, or Rantanen that's hurt. But Dallas right now, I think would be the only team out west that would truly give them a run for their money. Just because I think Ottinger and Hellebuck are probably
that's a goaltending duel right there.
Like
that's a series to watch.
That's probably your best bet. Like if you're Dallas, Winnipeg, that's your best bet. I don't know how they would meet each other, but just if Winnipeg, one missing piece would be a centerman, and it doesn't need to be a big piece. Like we saw Tampa Bay go for Blake Coleman. You just need a better third liner, because like no disrespect to Adam Lowry, but if he's your fourth liner, that's okay. And having a decent third line center would be great for them. I think if they get that at the deadline, and they should have no excuse to not go all in on someone, then they should do it. I think that would be the holy grail that they're missing, because that's all I think they really need is just a centerman.
And typically,
100%, I agree. I just wanted to add one thing. Basically, just agreeing with what you're saying, just reiterating. Adam Lowry's having a good season. He's currently at 23 points in 41 games, so he's at about a half a point per game, and is playing like a solid. He's more of a defensive-minded forward, and he's playing like that. So he is a good guy to have in their bottom six. But I agree with you. If they could push him down to the fourth line and get another guy. There is a couple of centers that are believed to be on the market right now. I doubt they're going to go out and get a Bo Horvat, but it's a possibility.
I wasn't thinking that. I think that's too much for what.
Yeah, so I agree, but I'm just saying that's obviously a big name, but there are a few centers that are on the market that teams are believed to be kind of moving away from. So if they could go out and get one of those centers to fill out either their second or their third line to push Adam Lowry back, because he would be a great fourth line center, like you mentioned. But I think if they could solidify that center slot, I like their wingers. I like their top six especially. They could get as well a little bit of more bottom six depth, but I really like the way this team is built. And if they could add one or two more depth options, I really think this is looking like a scary team when it comes to the playoffs.
And that's a blessing when you got to say, I think they could add one or two options. If it's that little, and that's the thing that might be able to push you over the edge and into better competition, I think you're all going to go in for it and take it. And it's really nice that they've set the table up really nicely heading into the trade deadline, which is obviously a little ways away. But when you're sitting in a position like they are right now, and you know that you've been dominating other teams for so long, and it's been so much consistency going through your lineup, it doesn't look like it's going to change too much. So this team is ready. They smell the blood in the water, and it's going to be really fun to watch them and see what they can do. Trades is a big thing for them. Trades have also been a big thing in the past for a team we're about to talk about right now, the Florida Panthers. And it's all that everyone has been talking about on Twitter, on social media, because listen, they made a trade last year. We kind of ripped into it a little bit, and it was Ben Sherratt, and it was heading from Montreal to Florida, and in exchange, the Florida Panthers they coughed up a pick. That's cool, whatever. All the teams give picks, but they coughed up a pretty significant one. They did not lottery protect their first round pick that they gave. Was it a first round pick they gave, Jared?
Yeah, first round pick in 2023 with no protection, and that's a very strong draft.
Yeah, exactly. That is a really ballsy move from the Florida Panthers. And well, it's not looking too much like it's paying off. This team has had a big fall from grace, to say the least. Guys are just not producing. Guys are getting injured. And those little bottom six guys that were just knocking it out of the park last year, it's not happening. It's not in the same tempo this season. And the goaltending, we always knew the Florida's goaltending was always a bit shaky. It's really showing this year. I believe Bobrovsky has a minus 900 save percentage, and they're sitting 22nd. So it could get ugly. This is a team that has enough talent to turn it around, but we've been saying this for a little bit now. We've been kind of tongue in cheek in the group chat a little bit, because we're like, okay, it's a little bit now. It's a little bit now. They're getting a little lower and a lower, but they got the talent to turn it around. Don't worry. This team they can make the playoffs very easily, but it just always seems every week we kind of reapproach this group. It doesn't ever seem like it's getting any better. But one guy who's really having a fun year in Florida, and I guess when you're in a state like that, why wouldn't you? When you go from Calgary to Florida, it's a pretty drastic scenery change. And this guy hasn't affected his game plan whatsoever. 39 games played for Matthew Tkachuk. He was the headliner heading into the offseason and heading into the regular season for the Florida Panthers. 22 goals, 29 assists, 51 points in 39 games, and he has just led the offense. But guys, aside from that, they've really been struggling to put the puck in the back of the net, and even worse, taking it from their own. So, Evan, you were really high in the Florida Panthers. You were one who said they didn't really going to have a fall from grace. This is a group that's so talented and so hard nosed. They know what it has to be done to get to the playoffs every single year. They were a shoo-in. Right now, it's not looking like that. What do you want to say about your Florida Panthers? And what have you been seeing from them that's just been showing that this play has just not been what we were expecting? Because we all had them in. I'm not going to defend anything. We all had them going to the playoffs in the preseason. Just right now, it's not looking that
way. They suck. Like they are. Look, in my the only thing I didn't expect them to trade Huberdeau and then their number one defenseman.
Everything changes.
Like a year before their contracts expired. I didn't expect them to salary dump everyone and then I don't know that I said it was a trade a win. I think I said Florida won that trade, and in hindsight, Huberdeau isn't doing great. Mackenzie Weegar is still a solid defenseman. Matthew Tkachuk is what we all expected Matthew Tkachuk to be, which is why I said Florida won that trade. I don't know. I mean, Sergei Bobrovsky is the most confusing goaltender, I think, in the NHL. He either looks like that 2019 or 2018 Sergei Bobrovsky, or he looks like a dude you just picked up at beer league. And Spencer Knight, I don't know what's happening to him. He was rarely do we see goalies go in the first round, let alone in the top 15. He was great in that bubble year, but he's probably because he was playing the same team every night. And I mean, he's just been, I mean, that's just been, I'm not ready to write off a goalie just because they're the hardest players to develop. And he's still so young. So he could shut me up in 5 years from now. But look, I don't know. That GM is on the hot seat for trading all of those picks and literally getting nothing in return.
And the funny thing was, he was getting praised by a lot of people last year for the moves he was making, being an aggressive GM that we rarely see in this day and age. Now it's
Yeah,
just,
I don't get the hype with Ben Sherratt
yeah,
because even in Detroit, he's awful. And I think he signed a 4x4 there. I don't understand it. I think it's just because he's a big body. But then, like,
That's all it
shit,
is.
find someone at McDonald's and put them in hockey gear. I don't know. Like, he's not good. And at that time, too, I didn't realize how deep the 2023 draft was. But just to keep what's going on now, I don't know how this team gets any better. Like, I don't see who they and like the prospects they've given up haven't played in the NHL yet, so I can't say that like these guys are the next big thing. Like Cole Schwint, I think he's a
yeah.
defenseman or something, who's now with Calgary's organization. I don't know. I don't see how this team gets better. They'll have room, I guess, because now they don't have Huberdeau and Uyghur. That's 16 million that they didn't have to worry about. So maybe they attack someone, but they can't get anyone during the deadline who's going to be anything relevant to them because they don't have any
Yeah.
picks. And yeah, shit. I can't believe Eric Stahl and Mark Stahl are still in the NHL. No disrespect to you guys, but like, I thought you were just going to
Yeah,
retire
it's time
when
to
you
hang him
signed
up.
in Florida. Like, it just seems like you're
Yeah.
looking for a retirement home right now because the fact that they're playing regularly just
And I'm
I've been
looking,
ranting too much,
no,
but
yeah.
let me one last thing. One last thing. The fact that Brandon Montour is their second leading scorer, like Barkov, who's played 32 games, 32 points, which is good. But we're used to seeing more from Barkov. Like in 32 games last year, he was probably at like 50 points. So I don't know if he misses his best friend, but uh, put the tissues away and wake up, please.
Now I'm looking at the teams that they're playing and the teams that they're losing to, and the reason why it just has been a tumble down the standings is just because they're not beating the teams that would get them ahead of the standings. They've lost to a lot of good hockey teams, and if you have an inability, like we've learned so far with the team that wears decorating my room right now, if you're unable to beat big teams and good teams, it's going to cost you. It's going to bite you in the butt. Right now, we're seeing it happen in live time. Jared, I want to talk to you a bit more about the trade deadline because I think that's something that might be the only thing. They don't have a large prospect pool. I don't think it's ready to pull that trigger of getting the prospects back in because I don't think any of them are ready or remotely even close to that. If you want to get out of this rut, and there's still a bit away, but if we hit March and April or early March or whatever the trade deadline
March
may
and
be this
April,
year,
they're fucked.
if it's similar to this or maybe slightly better, and they're still seeing themselves on the outside looking in on a playoff spot, what's the trade deadline going to look like for them? Because we know Zito is a very aggressive general manager. He will go out and he will trade whatever. This guy actually just traded guys last trade deadline or around that time, brought them in, going all in for that year push, and it got denied by the Tampa Bay Lightning. And or not, was it Tampa Bay that they got
Yeah,
denied?
they got swept by
Yeah.
Tampa.
Swept by Tampa. Yeah, thank you. Okay,
Oh,
swept by
that.
Tampa.
Oh.
And who they bring in? Giroux they brought in, and he's gone.
And Sherrod.
Sherratt, he's gone. Like the trades, if you're looking for longevity, they have not won any of them. What is going to be the success, the formula for that success in this trade deadline? Because I think that could be the saving grace for them. But at the same time, too, they could just even hammer them more and more down on the grave if they get it wrong once more. And Bill Zito, he's had some successful years in the past. He's got a team that would never go into the playoffs to the playoffs. It could be ugly. He can get fired, man. And we all know how it works down in Florida. You get out, you're out of there. You're not coming back, and you're not even being remotely close to coming back over there. So, what's your thoughts heading into the trade deadline? Is it going to be something that's very important to them amongst other teams, and where does it rank among importance for the Florida Panthers?
I'm going to give Bill Zito a piece of advice right now. Do not do anything that you aren't sure is going to age well. He made a ton of reactionary moves at the deadline, bringing in guys with no future tenure, guys like Ben Sherratt and Claude Giroux, who had no contract beyond the year. And he basically decided, I'm going to go all in right now and bring in these guys that I can't guarantee are going to be on my team. Gave up way too much for them, especially in the case of Ben Sherratt. And he had no plan. He clearly went out about that Ben Sherratt trade in particular with no plan. He didn't know what he was going to do. He said at the time, okay, I want this guy on my team, so I'm going to give whatever they're asking for, an unprotected first round pick. He didn't know if he was going to be able to bring that guy back. He didn't care, to be honest. Do not make mistakes like that again, because that's why right now everyone in the hockey world is sitting there laughing at the moves he made last year.
You get what
He
you
needs to
deserve.
go. He well deserved because he basically looked okay. Ben Sherratt sure, he's a guy that filled a role that Florida wanted last year. They wanted a big body guy that's going to make them a tougher team to play against. But he basically fell to all their negotiation tactics, and they're like, okay, you want this big body guy, give us a first round pick. And they're just like, okay. And didn't think about what the future ramifications of that are going to be. Didn't even think about whether the fact they're going to be able to get that guy long term. Obviously, he ended up leaving and going to Detroit months after that trade was made. And now that pick could end up being Connor Bedard. It's actually possible because they're a lottery team. So he needs to go out, and yes, there are a lot of issues on the Florida Panthers that are easy to identify, those mainly being in terms of their defensive core and in terms of their depth. But if making moves to address those issues result in him bringing in guys without long-term tenure that could potentially blow up in the Florida Panthers' face, I'd honestly tell Bill Zito to hang up the phone, because it is not worth digging yourself into the hole that right now I would argue Bill Zito has buried himself into.
And GMs across the league, very good ones at that. Historic GMs, guys who have built dynasties, they have a very good tendency of having balance. Balance is a very important thing if you're a general manager and you're in position of making moves. Kyle Dubas, we'll talk about him because we see him making moves all the time. We always criticize them or analyze them or whatever it may be. He has a really good balance of going after guys and very impulsively, but also at the same time, holding on to stuff and saying, okay, this cannot work. Maybe this doesn't work. Or going with his gut and saying, I know what this player's about. A lot of guys maybe don't. Let's talk Matt Murray. He's had a pretty successful year. He's been having a rough patch the last couple of games, but he's had a successful year. And Sugai, he's seen him when he's played. He's seen him in front of Ottawa, and lo and behold, he's doing well. Another guy, I believe, he's playing defense for them right now very well. Why am I blanking on his name? He got No, Giordano, another guy. Timmins, there you go.
Oh, Connor Timmins. Yes.
Was he
Sorry,
not
I thought you were talking about last year's deadline. My mistake.
Was he not a Sioux guy? Timmins?
He was. Yes, he was.
There you go. Like the familiar, he knows his familiarity. He knows he keeps his cards close to his chest. He's the only guy that I think I know as a general manager that brings guys that he has had success with before and brings them into his organization right now, no matter how long down the road it may have been. It's about balance. I hate to bring the Leafs and Kyle Dubas back into this discussion, but it's just a comparison, right? These guys are good GMs. They're successful, and they're not always on the hot seat every now and then because they know how to balance their stuff. Zito has to learn that skill. And I think we're going to see that this trade deadline. It's a very important one for them. It's a very important one for him. And I think it's going to impact where this team goes because I think it's going to be a very vital one for this group. Is there anything we want to add on the Florida Panthers? Because
they have 4 draft picks in 2023. They only have 4 picks in 2020.
And the most dangerous draft that we've seen in the last couple of years.
This is like the deepest. I think it's the deepest since 03. Like I think this is the deepest in 20 years.
Yeah. At least it's the deepest since 2015. I'll say that right now.
Absolutely.
It might end up.
I think it's too. When you just look at like the 30th pick in this year's draft could be a Hall of Famer. Like it's just like this draft is insanely loaded with talent. Like I was even saying to my dad, like unless I'm getting an all-star in return, I'm not trading a first rounder in this year's draft. Like not even worth the risk.
Yeah. And what I'll say to that is first, I'm going to build on 2 points that Evan made right there. The fact that they only have 4 picks in the first round in this year, or not the first round, 4 picks in the entirety of the draft. That would be crazy if they had 4 picks in the first round.
Yeah, Arizona.
4 picks in the entirety of the deepest draft, at least in recent memory. It shows once again that Bill Zito went into this year without any plan. And most of the good GMs in the league, they know down the line what are years that have strong players and are years that we need to prepare for leading for towards that. He had no business and didn't even care to look into what's coming up. Will it make sense? Will I regret this decision trading a first round pick unprotected next year? All he looked at is, we're good right now, and I think we're going to be good moving forward, so I'll just throw that pick away. And right now, it could absolutely blow up in the face of the Florida Panthers and their entire franchise. And another thing I want to build on what Evan said is the fact that he said word for word, I wouldn't move a first round pick in the upcoming draft unless you could guarantee you're getting a superstar back. The Florida Panthers gave up an unprotected first round pick for a guy who, even at his peak, even at his best, is a defensive minded, big body shutdown guy that's going to be physical. Like Evan said, you could get that anywhere. The fact that they were like, okay, it is an area of need, but we're going to give up the highest price for that. It's the biggest mistake. It was easy to identify it was a big mistake at the time. And right now, it is absolutely blowing up. And like we said, rightfully so, the hockey world is looking at Bill Zito and laughing at him. He took an area of need and gave whatever the hell the Montreal Canadiens asked for. And right now they could end up walking away. It is not impossible for them to get Connor Bedard and Adam Fantilli. It is not impossible because they have 2 first-round picks, their
That
own
would
and
be
the Florida
so
Panthers one.
unreal.
And that would be the
Like,
that'd be a dagger into like be an embarrassment on the entire NHL's not the NHL, but like in NHL history, that could be one of the biggest embarrassments from a team we have seen in
Yeah,
quite some time. And I just watched this Maple Leafs team play a couple times here and there, so it could be up right in there.
I just like I'm looking like at a potential mock draft like for 2023, and like even the 31st pick and 32nd pick in this year's draft, like in this year's potential draft, could wind up being a point per game play. Like this draft is it's pretty. I mean, it's pretty nuts. Like to your point, like Bill Zito did not do a good job, and neither did his. But it's not just Bill Zito.
yeah, no,
It's a
but he's the
scouting
GM,
team.
so
But yeah,
he's
he's a GM. But it's a scouting team too for not realizing that like holy crap, like just the amount of talent that's coming out of this year could be astronomical. Maybe it's not. We got to figure out why Ben Sherratt was so highly touted in the trade deadline. Like I got
Montreal
it.
media did their job.
Montreal did.
Montreal media peddled that guy and was like talked about him like he's freaking the
They
reincarnation.
deserve a raise. They deserve a raise because who the like Ben Sherratt like they were making this guy seem like he was like Victor Hedman, like a big body shutdown guy. Like I don't get it. They deserve a raise. Half of the jersey sales of whoever they pick with Florida's pick, half of them.
And all I'll say is thank the Lord that Kyle Dubas didn't fall for that bull crap because there were a lot of rumors. Oh, the Leafs need
Absolutely.
defense. They should go get Ben Sherratt. Well, not when the asking price is a prospect and a first-round pick and one of the best drafts in history. And I don't know why Florida fell for that, but they clearly did. And right now they're digging their own grave because they gave up a player who isn't even currently on their payroll and potentially lost one of the best generational prospects we've seen in years.
Yep,
Yeah.
digging their own grave. I think that's a way to end it off here. Florida
Yeah.
Panthers, man. Bill Zito, whether you want to put the blame on him, which I think you are more than able to, whether you want to put on the talent that this team has or the lack thereof, as we're seeing this year, or just the lack of togetherness, the lack of chemistry with this group that's kind of leading to them failing to put up wins consistently and in a good period of time. There's so many ways you could look at it. The Florida Panthers are tumbling down the standings. They were the laughing stock once. They might become the laughing stock once more. But that does it for us on the Leafs Line podcast. We talk Jets. We talk Cats. Both ends of the spectrums. That's kind of what we cover here on the Leafs Line podcast. If you want to follow us on Dynasty Sports Network, you can find a lot of our clips, even in the upcoming days, of a lot of our preseason clips getting revisited. Definitely check that out, Dynasty Sports Network on TikTok, Dynasty Sports Network on Instagram, and you can even search it up on Google as well, dynastysportsnetwork.ca, and you'll find it. It's all there. You can find a lot of content there, and even our show. Our show is also on that platform as well. But thank you guys for tuning in. I am your host, Mary Russo. Evan Davis and Jared Rotenberg join me tonight. We're going to go catch a Leafs game and see how that thing goes. But yeah, that does for us. Take care, everyone. Have a great rest of your evening, and cheers.